Welcome to the AI-driven PM podcast. I'm your host, Rick Morris. In this series, we explore the transformative power of artificial intelligence in the world of project management. Join us as we delve into the latest trends, tools, and techniques that are revolutionizing how projects are planned, executed, and delivered. Whether you're a seasoned project manager or just starting out, this podcast offers valuable insights and practical tips to help you harness the power of AI for success. Get ready to take your project management skills to the next level with AI-driven PM. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the season finale of season 1 of AI-driven PM. I'm your host, Rick Morris, here as always to talk to you about all things AI and all things PM. And remember, the PM is project management, portfolio management, program management, product management, all of those things. And what a season it's been, right? We've already really looked at a tremendous amount of landscape for how AI is going to impact our profession, and so excited about that. But today, I wanted to close this season with a little bit of a look to the future. In fact, it was just announced from OpenAI that they're going to be including agents potentially around January of 2025. And that's so exciting because agents is really where all of this is going. And even if you think of, if you've seen RPA or remote process automation, this was already kind of foretelling where AI was going to go. A lot of organizations have invested in RPA. It's really, really a cool technology. Some great companies out there do it. I think it's UiPath and NICE and some others that are out there. But what's really cool about RPA is it would look at like how you would do all these different keystrokes. So if you think of like a customer service department, a customer service department has to bring up the customer, and they have to go into billing and look at this and this other system, and all of this has different IDs and different things. And meanwhile, a customer's sitting there. Well, an RPA agent essentially, as the person comes in, could automatically go find all those pieces of information and serve it to the customer service agents so that they could see it. So that was kind of a precursor of where we saw some of the technology and automation going. But now if you layer AI on top of that, you start to get agents. And what's different is in agents than in what's normal ChatGPT. Well, most of the time ChatGPT is helping us generate text. It's been our thinking partner. It helps us write formulas in Excel, as we've seen. It helps us think about risks or help us ideate on things. It helps us craft summaries and executive stuff. But we're giving it input, and it's taking that input that we give it and giving an output that we've requested. But sometimes, we want things to like go get information. So for instance, we want to go search and find things. And maybe there's some news stories that we want to go and summarize. Well, right now, what we kind of have to do is go get those news stories, put it in as an input and say, hey, go do this for us. Well, agents is really going to step things up and start bringing automation into the play, where it's going to start to do some autonomous tasks for us, but that could be chaining 4 or 5 things, different things together. So think about anything that has like an API, essentially ChatGPT is going to be able to enact that API, go get that information, and then do some analysis on it or mirror it with something else, marry it with something else. And think about, like, we could put tools in agents that do things like flowcharts, or there could be an agent that searches the web, or there can be an agent that does like sentiment analysis. There's going to be an agent that maybe helps us create personas, which essentially would be just like tons of prompts to give us context of what it is that we want to do. And so an agent would allow us to kind of pick a persona, pick a task, and then we give it an instruction and it goes and does it. In fact, a colleague of mine, Joe Hours, did a great webinar for Centric Consulting where you can use agents to form sophisticated flows. And for instance, he did a little mock-up demo where he said, like, I want to analyze a company stock projection. And so he had an agent that went and retrieved the SEC filings, and then it went and got the latest news reports. And then it had an agent that did stock analysis, where it would go out to like Yahoo Finance and some others and get some stock information and do some analysis on that. And then he gave it a persona of a stock analyzer and then put it all to work. And so he was like, hey, can I have a stock analysis for this quarter and should I buy? And so then the agents went out to the SEC and went out and got the company's latest filings and analyzed all that data, and it went and got the stock data, and it did all of this analysis and comes back and says, hey, we think you should, buy or sell, and here's why. Really, really, really cool. And that's kind of like he said, it was a consumer data. It'd be something like we would want to do, but organizationally, I mean, things like when you start thinking about RPA and then having kind of that human discussion with AI, like he did a proof of concept at an insurance company where we were trying to open up a claim, via an email that came in with a picture, things like that. Really, really cool stuff. And again, I'll put a link in the comments to that webinar if you want to go see it. He's actually kind of the leading thought leader for Centric Consultant in the AI space, and somebody who I've learned a tremendous amount from. But let's talk about agents and the way I see that impacting project management. So for instance, we could use an AI agent that could, look at a program management perspective, and not only look at like timelines or flagging potential conflicts or reducing resource bottlenecks in real time or giving suggestions, but it also could analyze like the project's progress, predict delays based on historical data, recommend adjustments or reassignments to optimize portfolio performance. And one of the things that I always used to design into the tools that I deployed, so when I deployed like CA's Clarity, I always wanted to deploy kind of a health check for the project manager. So it was one thing to be able to say, hey, these are all the dashboards and all of our projects lined up. But I also kind of wanted a dashboard for the PMO manager to say, it's been 2 weeks since this project manager's updated this project, or, these risks we're supposed to realize, but they haven't been updated, like those kinds of things. So we were already starting to build kind of those queries and things like that. But again, we had to know that in advance. AI could actually help us search for that. And so we could create an agent that says, go look at the risk logs, see the last time it was updated, see if a risk was supposed to realize. Has there been any changes from, say, the project notes, like the meeting minutes or that kind of stuff that could suggest some of the changes to these risks? That could be an agent. And then what ends up happening is you call a variety of agents that then turns around and presents a list of things to the program manager for them to go decide whether or not they're impactful, right? This is where we're going, is it's going to do a lot of this heavy lifting. Again, I've never once stated that I think that AI is going to replace project management, because it's going to be able to replace all of this complex data mining that we have to go do, but we still have to have the human involvement, the influence, the suggestion of what we're going to do next. All of that human element, I just don't see AI taking over, at least not anytime soon. However, think about the efficiencies. Like, again, most of our job is supposed to be spent communicating, but so much of our job is having to pull information from all these various sources to report. And quite frankly, on status reports, I've not always been a huge fan of them, because by the time they're published, they're out of date, right? So, and I always said, the power of having a project portfolio management system was so that project managers could look forward, not backwards, right? So if you think about all of the things that we do as a project manager, most of the time we're analyzing things that's happened in the past so we could summarize and announce progress. But if we spend all of our time looking backwards, when do we actually have time to do our real job, which is predictive analytics? Like looking at different things and saying, hey, these 7 or 8 things could happen. And if they did, what would we do? Those are the predictive analysis that we should be doing as a project manager. Unfortunately, a lot of times our reporting requirements make us focus backwards so much. And so this is where I really see AI agents being really, really exciting for project management, because if we can automate a lot of that, then we could spend our time doing more and more predictive analytics, even using AI to suggest 4 or 5 areas for us to go look at the predictive analytics. One of the other areas, I was spawned by this when I was watching Joe talk about sentiment analysis on the news stories for the stock analysis that he was doing. I was like, that's something that we could really be looking at consistently on the project communications coming from the teams and the sponsors and that kind of stuff. Think about like having an agent that could see all of the emails that are coming in about a project and is checking and proactively looking at these communications with stakeholders, recognizing sentiment in emails, and alerting project managers maybe in shifts of tone that could start to indicate that they're starting to become dissatisfied, or they're a little bit off the rails, or we need to do some course correction. Um, Beyond that, the agent could also propose draft responses based on the stakeholder preferences, managing follow-ups and ensuring no stakeholders overlooked in complex projects. Think about the power of that. So right now, we kind of have a single status report that goes out. And I'm a big believer in DISC as well, which means there's 4 distinct ways to communicate, right? So you've got your bullet point format, you've got your visual format, you've got your behind the why type format, and you have your facts and figures format. Those, and we kind of have to figure out ways to do all that. But what if, right, because we had the time, we could craft more individual communications to the stakeholder, outlining their preferences. Now, again, that would be impossible for us to do as a project manager in general, especially let's say we had 20 solid stakeholders that we're communicating with. Normally, we just send out that blanket. However, with AI, we, in doing all that analysis, could actually pre-draft 20 different emails for us to go in and peruse, but make that more of an individual communication, really pulling in those stakeholders' needs. I mean, again, it's mind-blowing to me. I don't even know how that would work yet, but that's where I see this thing going. Think about too where it could monitor development. So AI agents could monitor development metrics and provide kind of real-time assessments, could track code updates, could analyze user feedback. They could help us predict future bugs, suggest risk mitigation strategies, those kinds of things. It can also help us generate contingency plans or offer simulations on various courses of action. One of my favorite things, and was a blog post, and I believe I even did an episode about Monte Carlo analysis, how that was always a brilliant thing, but it always required way too much data in order for it to be accurate. And again, after you put in all of that data, the output of that was a percentage chance of hitting any specific date or budget. With this, again, we could use those types of simulations on various courses of action to turn around and say, here's like 9 different outcomes that we see based on what's happening. Now, this is already kind of happening in the sense that you can cut and paste code into these various tools, into Claude or into ChatGPT or Copilot or any of these, and they would actually suggest optimizations of those code. But an agent could actually automate that whole flow. So instead of having to cut and paste and all that kind of stuff, what if on check-in, right? So developers been working on some code, they check it into, say, GitHub, an agent then goes and sees that and says, hey, we would suggest this for an efficiency. We see a couple of these things here. So it's like your first QA step that it comes through and suggests back to the developer several different changes. They can approve or deny that, then check it in, and then off it goes to the next thing. So this is already occurring in some areas, but again, an agent could just make it take it so much further. Speaking of like development too, I'm actually going to show you a very, very detailed thing that I do when I track agile projects. So we'll get into a little bit of theory here, like I always like to do. But I have a very, very disciplined thing that I do for any kind of agile development. And it helps us with cost. It helps us understand the cost of epics and all that kind of stuff. And so I'll actually share my screen here and show you a couple of these things. So what I'm showing here is a lot of numbers, but essentially I'll walk you through the theory of this and what I generally do when I do sprint reports for agile projects that I run. So first, the steps that I take is I've got to update all the tickets, right, with release version, make them that they're going to move to prod, that kind of stuff. I want to ensure all the tickets have the correct sprint and are pointed. And then I export all the tickets to a spreadsheet. I release it then, say in Jira, close the sprint, move any of the open tickets to the next sprint, open the next sprint, make sure that I've got additional sprints open, because I always try to keep 2 sprints ahead in development. And then I start to look at the total amount of sprint points that we did, and I update this, which is what I call my sprint cost report. So what you're actually seeing here is a real one that I ran for years. but I would have different developers and obviously their cost, how many hours per day they actually spent, what their daily rate was. In essentially then I would track, when a developer started with us and when they finished, and did they come in like mid sprint or all that kind of stuff. And yeah, this can be a lot, right? But I would maintain this because what it would allow me to do is turn around and say, okay, for each one of these sprints, here is kind of our back end cost, mobile development cost, web cost, our QA, our design, our executive. What was my total development cost? What was my development and design cost? What was the total? Here you could actually see like what we planned our story points, but essentially what my velocity was for these story points and what were the actual story points that we completed, which allowed me to get into earn value of Agile, right? So I've always been kind of against earned value in project management because you have to make up numbers. We have to know, that this task was going to take 20 hours, that you spent 10 hours on it, and that you're 37% complete in order for us to get to an earned value metric. But the tenet in Agile where they say there's no partial completion for a story, you either get the points or not, allows me to run earned value at a more defined layer. So essentially what I do is I go in here and I have for each one of my sprints, what did we cost? And then here you can see I can get to what did we plan at a development and a total, right? But we planned that we were going to do, in this case, 360 points, but we did 259. But in this case, we had planned we were going to do 330 points and we did 436. So that's the difference between my plan cost and my actual cost, right? The other thing I can see when I trend data like this is how efficient are we becoming as a team? So for instance, we had a scenario here where, we upped the team. So here you can see we hired a bunch of people. We went from 304 to 545, but you could see how this team started to gel. And we started to reduce our story cost over time. And there would be variabilities and there'd be reasons behind that, risks, bumps, things that happen. But now what's interesting is now that I know a cost per sprint, I also know how many points in that sprint were completed for each epic, which allows me to get to a total epic cost. It allows me to tell you the total cost. In fact, there's a couple of other spreadsheets. So for instance, if you think about here, like this epic here, where it's like 594 points, that may have crossed 7 sprints. Well, I know how many points were in each sprint, and I know what the cost, both plan cost and actual cost were of each one of those points of those sprints. So now it's just a math exercise to tell you this is how much this epic cost, and was that a good decision, and that kind of stuff. I also could take this a little bit further and say, hey, listen, here's the story points that we did. Here's the points that were actually stories versus how many were actually bugs. So we could track the cost of bugs over true development. And in this case, like how many were design cost bugs, meaning bugs that were created because designs didn't match, things of that sort. Like you can get really, really granular here, but this allows me to trend and that kind of stuff. So really, really cool theory. Let's stop the share for a second. A really cool theory in terms of what I know from a data perspective in like what I can do with this information, but that's very manual and it takes a lot of work to keep up. So once I've done all of that to the cost report, I can total all the tickets by epic and apply the sprint cost. I can total all my tickets by developer, by epic, by ticket type. I can then decide how many of those points we're going to capitalize. I add all the sprint costs for developers in different areas. Other things I do to close out the sprint is I like to take an export of Jira to a spreadsheet to give to my customer service department to say, these are all the bugs that we fixed or things that we did. And then I update, all these cost reports, run all these reports, send all this stuff out, and off we go. Now, what if I had agents? What would happen if I had agents? Well, agents, first of all, one of the tenets is I have to ensure like ticket completeness. So that was a process I would run through is I would have to make sure all the tickets had the correct sprint assignment. They all had story points, and I'd have to go back to developers if we didn't have those. Here again, I could just deploy an agent that did a reminder to somebody that says, it looks like you're working on this story, but there's no story points, and that's against our covenant. So please, update the story points and continue to bug somebody until they actually do that. It could automate the export of the tickets to the spreadsheet. It could actually, an agent could go get the HR information. Again, there's like in this case, you saw where I had the cost per developer. I was an executive. I could go pull that information, but there's a lot of organizations that want to do blended rate by role or that kind of stuff. And then normally we pick a number and then that number just kind of stays, which doesn't really change the variability of things. So imagine if we had an agent that could go out, get the information, scrub it in a way that we couldn't attribute it to a specific person, but still have an accurate amount of cost or labor cost. And maybe it doesn't even go through, maybe if the agent just says for sprint 12, the cost is $400, or it was $37,000 of labor, whatever, right? But that agent could go out and get that piece, put that information against all the tickets and calculate the sprint cost. It could organize all the points by the epic and developer and slice and dice it and create additional spreadsheets that does all that information for me. And then it could sync, sprint cost, the capitalization short. It could automatically then, do the export to notify customer service. And even better, I could have an agent, whereas if somebody opened up a ticket or something, did something, it could go look in Jira to see if we're currently working on it. That was that's one thing that everybody's, begging for a lot of times is they're like, hey, when we're dealing with issues and we tell people it's going to be fixed, we don't know where it is in the roadmap or what's happening. Or, you can see that it's just absolutely mind-blowing and endless what we can do with agents. But I could basically, that whole thing that I just did and just showed you, agents could do 95% of that work. And then I could just do the analysis or provide, some of the key pieces and then run that out. Do you see where we're going with this with AI agents? So cool. So cool. So again, I just mentioned customer experience, but think about it. AI agents can use sentiment analysis to evaluate customer satisfaction across the support interaction. So this, can you answer a survey when you're done thing is killing us. But and I get asked for like I buy a stick of gum now and you get asked for a survey. But again, what if we could just analyze the data that we had, or we could analyze the tone shift? What about a tone shift during a conversation with AI? So think about a customer service comes in, we record them all anyway. We always say we're recording for monitoring, but what if I started off as a customer, I was just super angry and I was just lighting up the customer service person, and they did their job and calmed me down and even got me laughing at the end or whatever. Wouldn't we love to know that sentiment analysis and have a marker to go, not only was that a great interaction, but like that, we don't need a survey the customer satisfaction at that piece because they told us via sentiment. So just so many things that agents can do with us. We could do automated compliance and data integrity checks, right? An AI agent could automatically audit project data against compliance standards. So for instance, in my PMO, I had PM1, PM2, and PM3. PM3 was my senior person. PM2, ran 5 or 6 projects each. And PM1 was somebody who I felt that we hired into. I felt like they could be really had the soft skill set or the temperament to be a really good project manager, but just didn't have experience. And what I would do is I would pair my PM1 with my PM3. So my PM3 was my larger, more strategic thinker. And that person I would give, the biggest projects to, but I wanted to spread that person a little bit further. And so the PM1 would help take notes, would help update project schedules, almost kind of like an admin to the PM3, but they got to see how the PM3 interpreted things. So they were in the same meeting, but when a PM3 would be like, here's the notes that I think, or here's what we should do, great learning, opportunity essentially. But one of the things I had my PM1 do is I had certain things to be integrous for us. So for instance, none of my project managers every week when they publish their project plan, they weren't allowed to have a plan that had a past due start date or a past due finish date. They needed to make sure, like there was a communication plan, we needed to make sure that they followed that. So if they said that they were going to send out a status report every Friday, we needed to monitor that. So it was those types of compliance checks that we had. And we used to have what we call project binder reports. And essentially my PM1 would have to go audit all of the projects that were going on and do this. And again, that was on purpose so that that person could see, different ways to do project schedules, different ways to do project communications, that kind of stuff is a learning thing. But an agent actually could do all of those compliance checks for us, and also could simulate different scenarios to anticipate areas of conflict. So amazing things that we can start to think of when we start to stack automation and have agents talk to each other. Um, you know, we could have agents that are looking at the financials. Again, trying to tie off project financials can be very difficult sometimes. Sometimes, I know of organizations that have everything's in SAP, but maybe they've got like a CAPPM or a plan view, and the two don't talk to each other. And so project managers are constantly having to go back and forth on budgets and invoices and vendors and those are the things. Again, agents can help with all of that stuff. It can help us do talent and performance management. So it could monitor like team performance metrics or individual progress on tasks or provide personalized feedback based on performance trends. I mean, again, agents is where it's at. So all of that to say, like we've been building these building blocks, and if you've been following along with us and doing some of the work inside ChatGPT and doing what I suggest, which is play with it, every day and use it in as many contexts as you can, just so that you understand the flavor and what it can do for us, and that it's a thinking partner. As a matter of fact, I was having a conversation with my wife recently, and I was like, I don't even Google anymore. I just go to ChatGPT, because even when I go to Google, it's word matching. Whereas ChatGPT, I can go, no, that's not what I'm looking for. I'm actually meant to say it this way. It has context, which is everything when we're talking about searching results or trying to learn or trying to get to information. So, so hopefully you've been following along in those breadcrumbs that we've been leading. But the reason why I want to take a pause from season 1 to season 2 is, number one, just to get your feedback. What's working? What's not working? How do we do a better season 2? I already have plans to bring on some special guests to get into some more cutting edge things that are happening. But also, according to OpenAI, agents could be available as early as January. And that's what I'm hoping for, because I'd love to start to spend season 2 to come back to this episode and start going through some of these things and actually building out some of these agents and testing some of the waters and doing that as a group. I want this podcast to be kind of this iterative learning atmosphere for us, to where we're consistently building upon each other's knowledge on actual use cases, not just what can be, but what are we doing? What are these things? I'm getting exposure to some really cool cutting edge things that are happening. We're still building some stuff ourselves over here at our friends with Centric Consulting, and just super excited. I mentioned Centric Consulting. I did want to bring it back again. Joe Hours is that piece. I am going to post the comments or in the comments, put a link to his webinar. But I do want to pause really quickly to again recognize our sponsor for this entire season, Centric Consulting. Here's a little bit about them.
In today's economy, leaders are looking for a different kind of consulting partner. A partner that will work with you to understand your culture, technology, and employees. A partner that will develop the solutions you need, not the solutions they know best. For us, it's never been about simply checking a box. Since we were founded in 1999, Centric Consulting has established a reputation for solving its clients' toughest problems by delivering flexible, tailored, cost-efficient solutions, all centered on the right outcomes for each business. It's all part of our mission to deliver an unmatched experience you won't get anywhere else. Centered on what's best for you, Centric is ready to guide you on the journey ahead.
So thank you again, team, for being along on this ride. I've gotten phenomenal feedback. I hope this has been a good series for you. Again, we're going to close out season 1 here. We're going to get into some of the holidays. We're going to wait for some of these AI things to pop up. And I can't wait to get into season 2 with you next year as we try to explore AI agents more and also talk about how AI is going to help drive the 3Ps or the 4Ps in that scenario of project, program, portfolio, and product management in the future, or any other Ps that you can think of that fits with that. But thank you again so much. I'm your host, Rick Morris, and we'll see you next season on AI Driven PM. Thank you for tuning into the AI Driven PM podcast. We hope you've enjoyed this episode and found valuable insights to enhance your project management journey. If you did, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and leave us a review. Don't forget, you can also find our episodes on YouTube for more great content and visual presentations. This podcast is proudly produced by R Squared Multimedia. Until next time, keep innovating and embracing the power of AI in your projects.